Jamie Retzky, and I'm the curator at New Bedford Art Museum Artworks. Okay, so this is Practice Best Practice, and this is our first community conversation and panel that we're doing. And we have a ton of things to talk about, and we have a ton of resources. I find that when I go to panels, the thing I want the most is for the panelists to give me links to things that will be helpful. So we have a few of those. Some of them are printed out in these handy packets. And then if you are on our email list, we'll send out blasts of all kinds of fun info. Okay? I just want to say that I'm so excited to have our panelists here. And this is, like I said before, a community conversation about supporting local artists, helping each other figure out what best practices are, whether that is selling your artwork or displaying artwork in your local business, or utilizing artists to help raise money for your nonprofit. And it's also important to note that we're learning these things too. And it's been really interesting to go through all the stuff that these guys have given us and be like, okay, how can I apply this to the museum? What are some mishaps that the museum has done? What are we doing well? So this is going to be a just rolling combo. And while we have amazing panelists who are experts at everything, we know that there's experts in the audience too. So I've got a couple of prompt questions. If you've got questions, just shoot that hand up, and we will get through this night. Today we're talking about exhibiting for exposure or not, and what that means. So first and foremost, I'm going to hand this mic down this way, and I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves. And the things I'm asking of you, your name, your title, are you an artist, are you a curator, are you a wizard, and then your preferred pronouns, and then what's one favorite thing about being in the art world or whatever you do. So for example, my name's Jamie, curator of Art Museum. I use she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. And my favorite thing about working in the arts is I love packing artwork. It's like Christmas every time, so it's soothing for me.
That sounds like fun.
I'll pack any of your artwork.
I'm Dan Santoro. I'm a photographer. I own S&G Project Gallery with the G, who's back in the other part of the room. And I have online marketing and website design business, and an international consulting company that does management consulting. Pronouns, he, and him, and one of the two most fun things, I'm going to make it two because I get the cheat. One is writing checks to artists when I sell their work. I really enjoy that. The other is talking to people about the artwork that is either mine or other people's hanging on walls.
Cool.
Great, thank you, Dan and Jamie, for organizing this tonight. I'm really thrilled to be here. My name is Donna Dodson. I'm a sculptor, and pronouns is she and hers. And I am primarily a sculptor. I love making work, and I also do some freelance writing and curating.
Hello, my name is Camilo Alvarez. I am a gallerist, curator, preparator, dealer, all-around kind of appreciator of art. I had a gallery in a brick and mortar in the south end of Boston that has now gone nomadic. I work with primary and secondary market, emerging, mid-career, and established artists. And I went to undergrad for art history, and I got a master's in museum studies. Yeah. And the favorite thing, I guess, for me would be watching people look at art. It's like watching people dancing.
Well, whether it's good or bad, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, in these handy packets, you've got a couple different things. First is this letter to artists written by Wage, and we'll send you links to Wage, they're amazing. The Wage is a group out of New York that is organizing around getting artists paid. They're basically organizing around what we're talking about. So we're using them for a lot of these resources. This thing that starts Dear Artist, we're not gonna read it together, I won't make anyone read out loud, what a nightmare. But it's a really good intro to what some of the things we're trying to talk about and think about. And then here is Wage's Womanifesto, I believe it's called. Again, talking about how we need to standardize artists getting paid. So, now in this, there is a quote that I want to pull some questions from. It says, Wage believes that the promise of exposure is a liability in a system that denies the value of our labor, our being artists. So, my question for you guys. First, I'm going to start with Den. Den, what does it mean to exhibit for exposure? What does that mean?
It usually means you're getting screwed. Sorry. Exhibiting for exposure is one of those things that we get asked to do frequently where, oh, it'll be good, people will see your name, people will see your work. We're not going to sell it for you, we're not even going to try. Whenever somebody asks me if I'm interested in showing for exposure, I immediately ask them what I can buy with exposure in their establishment. Because if there's no exchange, there's no exchange. So I think we need to think about, there are a couple of instances where there's, where it's appropriate, where the exposure is actually useful to you, but it's pretty rare. It's not on the wall of the coffee shop. It's not when somebody wants free wallpaper. There are times where, if you're in a venue where collectors come to find people, and you know that that's really true, that's useful. But for the most part, we need as artists to stop and say, wait a minute, no, we need to get paid. If we don't get paid, we don't make things. So I'm going to leave it at that and pass it along.
I got a question for Camilo.
Okay, sure.
Camilo, you talked briefly in your intro about emerging mid-career and established artists. Is there does exhibiting for exposure apply to those different kinds of artists in different ways? Should it? What are your thoughts on that?
So, I guess, let me start by, I think, defining, let's all be clear also, this is highly opinion. It all always depends on the context. As, Den said, a coffee shop versus a museum, very different contexts. So exposure is site-specific, site-responsive, and also depends on the audience that goes to this site, right? So exposure within a museum can be very, very good. Exposure within a coffee shop can also be very, very good. It depends where that coffee shop is. If the coffee shop is in the Hamptons versus, somewhere else, who goes into that coffee shop, right? And, it is what it is. I think it cuts both ways. As for the definition of emerging, mid-career, and established, I think that also it depends on price points, but it also depends on the context of where those artists get their exposure / exhibit. So usually mid-career and established artists try and stay away from, the coffee shop, let's say, and are mostly acquired by, their price point is higher, so they can only be acquired by certain very wealthy individuals or museum institutions. Emerging artists are younger also, but then there's also, some people would like to separate it by age, but I disagree with that. I think it's by experience. Now, exposure, experience, exhibitions. So the etymology of that word is something that should probably be considered as well, right? It's, putting something out there. Now let's talk about the object, because I think the object itself is sometimes disregarded. This is a unique object that kind of doesn't necessarily fall within the purviews of capitalism. Within exposure, within an exhibition, within the way of art or an object acquires value, not necessarily financial value, because cultural value is most important. Financial value follows that. So then, how does that object acquire that? It is by being sensed. It is by exposure to the senses. So again, it's a razor's edge. Does that answer the question? To a certain degree?
It opens it up. I got a question for you, Donna. And this is totally coming from an example of you showing your artwork here in New Bedford. And my question for you is any kind of exposure necessarily good exposure for artists? Is there such thing as bad exposure?
I think there's no such thing as bad press. If you're talking about CO Cinderella, that was a public art project, the Seaport Art Walk, that Jessica Bergoli's organized for many years right here in New Bedford, with the mayor's support. And one gentleman raised a petition to take it down, and then the mayor called the first day and said, "Don't worry, we have your back, we put it up." And it was a temporary project, so there's a lot of irony in petitioning to take something down that was going to come down.
Yeah.
So anyways, but I feel sort of sorry for the person that raised the petition, because forever, I think if you Google his name, it will be attached to Seal Syndrome, which he took aim at, which is fair game, it's public art. It's not always fun to read negative opinions about your work, but I think public art is a democratic sport. You put it out there, you don't control who looks at it, you don't control what people have to say about it, think about it, feel about it. And so I kind of embraced that. I found the process actually, it created a huge amount of press for my work that was kind of unprecedented. So he did me a huge favor. And, and that's the irony of it. I think having your work talked about is always a good thing, I would say. Like that's, if you're making work to connect with people or cultural value, or there's presumably a reason that you're driven to make your work, and if you're connecting with people on that level, it can be unsettling, but I think ultimately that is kind of the goal. You're looking for people who would buy that work, respond to that work, talk about that work, and you're looking for those like-minded people. So I think that's...
Thanks for talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, you're definitely have that sticker on my water bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys know what we're talking about?
Not exactly.
Okay.
It's just gonna happen.
Okay.
I'll tell you after. If you've seen those images around, that was this lovely human sculpture, and we'll talk more.
It was a well-rested seagull.
I know people apparently have a hard time with breasts.
Yeah.
You kind of think though that might be controversial.
Not really. I mean, the irony is that it's this maternal-looking figure.
It's hysterical.
Yeah, and so the idea that this was considered a hyper-sexualized image of women.
Yeah, I mean it's also a bird. So.
It's a bird, and everyone knows birds don't have breasts. Okay, you got me, right?
It was clothed.
Yeah, it had an address, so I mean the whole thing was funny on so many levels and
Just
disturbing on some level.
chicken breast,
Yeah, there you go.
That's right. You brought up cultural value, and that was something that I've been thinking a lot about in regard to exhibiting for exposure. One of the things that we have a hard time with, and we'll just only talk about this country because that's where we're at, is I think that there's an undervaluing of labor when it comes to artwork and people who do the work of art making. Do any of you guys have any insight on how we as artists, collectors, gallerists, and consumers of art raise the value? And I'm not necessarily talking about monetary value, but just the idea that there is value to creating culture. Who wants to go first?
Well, basically for me, can you hear me without the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm a big guy. I think in order to create, I think with me, I had this gallery for 13 years. Prior to that, I worked for art dealers, I worked, galleries, museums, artists themselves. I worked in an artist residency, I worked for art delivery companies. So that is, and basically I saw it turning from an art world into an art industry. So that's one aspect of this whole situation. But then if you think about it, the way you gain exposure / cultural value is through the work being sent, so therefore press exhibitions, and acquisitions. So if you subdivide that, press, sometimes it's temporary, in the news, through the web, sometimes it's permanent, through a catalog, from a museum, goes to the Library of Congress. Exhibitions, sometimes they're temporary, sometimes they're permanent. Acquisitions, sometimes they're permanent, sometimes they're private, sometimes they're public. So that cascades, I think, into kind of creating an industry /world /value. Basically, how everybody involved in that entire web, there is an interchange of information and the ideas being the more important part of these objects, right? Everybody here is trying to express something, and when it comes down to it, what is the value of that idea? How much did it cost you in your life to create that idea, to create that object? And so that's where value stems from. And so everybody involved with that object, I personally don't think people own objects. They're kind of merely stewards of it. Same thing with a museum. So what is the life of that object?
Yeah, and I would say sort of the economics of being artists, like the gallery model is, in this day and age, that you loan stuff on consignment, so you don't get paid unless it sells. And that's a commercial gallery model. Museums, it's more like, your costs might be covered, and what you're hoping is the museum buys it and adds it to the permanent collection. So, or does a catalog, so there's sort of this putting you in this like institution or canon of the art world by showing in museums. And then, public art is everything from temporary to monuments that somehow signify memorials or presidents or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways to be an artist, and do people value culture? I feel like in every other country but this one, art is much more easily understood and valued, and kind of, is it our own kind of difficult relationship with culture? Are we in this kind of like cultural flux right now? Why is it so difficult, for this country to embrace art? And at the same time, like, a lot of people embrace art, and is it just for the elite? Is it for everyone? And I feel like if you're talking about like galleries versus public art, you're talking about very different ability of people to be exposed to it, have access to it, to own it, to be engaged with it, So I think like there's a lot of different points to touch on. If you're saying like what's culture, who's having access to it, who's making it.
I think the most interesting part of this art industry /world is that there is no regulatory body to it, which is incredibly scary, but yet incredibly freeing. So for example, within my gallery, yes, I depended on consignments, but then in turn also, who's paying my rent unless I basically sell something. But I had a format where I paid for shipping, but then in turn, if I wanted the artist on site, I paid for their stay, and similar things. And this is a negotiation that can happen, because to a certain degree, it's like the more the merrier, right? I mean, if you're want people there, you got to have more people there. And I think that actually has to be a conversation. I think the artist actually has incredible power to bring that conversation into the fore, instead of just relying on this white cube person. I think it's amazing how people kind of get intimidated by that institutional aspect of the gallery or the museum,
Yeah.
In addition, launching from that, part of the problem that we see is that there's sort of this mystery around art, or this, like it's kind of got a priesthood level of thing going on. And we as artists really need to break through that. We need to demystify, we need to bring our friends along, we need to bring people in who don't have the same kind of relationship to art we have, and help them have their own relationship to art. That's part of the culture too. I mean, you see the things that are seen as classics, and everybody kind of knows what some of those are, and that's their relationship to art. But that's long dead. And there's a lot of new stuff being created and born every day. You were doing some of it, we are doing some of it. And we need to explain somehow to the rest of the world that isn't us why that's got value and what it is that we're bringing to the whole process and to the table. You know, this whole series, one of the things we're going to be doing later on is one called Why Haven't You Started Your Art Collection Yet? That's going to be geared towards helping to demystify it. But it's really on us. We have to explain to our friends, and we have to explain to our families, and we have to explain to people we have conversations with why they should be going to openings. There's no obligation. Just go have some fun, look at some stuff. You know, why you should care that your artist friends are working their asses off nights and weekends, you know, and have their other job, and why art should be important enough to support some of these people.
Within that demystification, I think it's important for actual artists to do it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always incredibly insulted when I have a curator come in and they're, oh, what kind of paint is that? If you're a curator and you can't determine what kind of paint it is, you probably shouldn't be looking at painting. You know, I mean, that's just kind of like, I mean, I think it's just kind of common parlance, right? I mean, you should know your medium. So I think determining if like, I mean, I'm a true believer, if like I'm gonna have somebody clean my house, I should probably learn how to clean it myself, right? So if you want to learn what a gallerist does, you should probably try and do it yourself. You know, I mean, you gather some people together, there's a plethora of empty storefronts these days, considering, you know, what's going on with our economy, but that's a whole other conversation. And I'm pretty sure that you can approach your state, local, federal, you know, people put together a 501c3 relatively easily if you have that neighborhood support and kind of, you know, do it yourself. I mean, in New York, I lived in New York and I moved to Boston about 14 years ago now. And that was actually something that, because it was so segmented, because it was so opaque, you know, it was so intimidating, and Chelsea held that power. Mind you, I think the elites want to keep and hold that power. So I think, you know, to break it, you have to do it in order to, you know, kind of get in there, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, along with that, just thinking from the museum perspective, like, the museum world is already shifting from this sort of traditional museum mode that's like, we bestow the wisdom upon you, and you just have to accept this as truth, right? To what's called the Reinvented Museum, right? And I mean, and that is just sort of a more open-ended thing where we're more interested in empowering artists and makers and opening up the storytelling. So I don't know where I was going with that, but there's that. And then the other thing is, as a museum professional, this is probably going to come back to bite me in the ass, but it is always okay if you're asked to be in a show, it's always okay to ask if there's any money. And this is a thing that I run into with artists all the time. They're like, oh, I'm too afraid to ask for money, because, you know, it's a nonprofit and we know that you, blah, blah, blah. It's fine, because at the end of the day, the curator or whoever's organizing the show can either say yes or no. But you have to ask. It's not gonna hurt my feelings. It's, because I gotta say, most of the curators I worked with, as a professional artist and also as a fellow curator, they are, a lot of us, and correct me if I'm wrong, are, will go to bat for you and will try, at least try and figure out how the institution can support you in applying for grants. The institution can support you to connecting you to some rich people, right? I don't know if any of you have done the thing where you have to like go out to dinner with a donor, but that's the thing I've done as an artist, and it was weird, but whatever. Like, you know, the gallery found a donor, and then like the little carrot stick at the end of it was the donor got to have dinner with all the artists, and it felt weird, but also, you know, that show, as the curator of that show, I got $3,000 to do a show. I'm willing to sit with a rich person for that, you know?
So, I mean, that's also part of it right there. I think in order for the demystification, the opacity, the transparency to happen, I think more artists have to get involved in the museum. So therefore, learn how a museum acquires work.
Yes.
Learn who is giving that money. I sit with donors. I'm the co-chair of the advisory board at the ICA, the Institute of Contemporary Art Boston. I've sat on many committees everywhere, and everybody just wants to learn, you know, and it's incredibly amazing sometimes even insulting the level of questions that get asked by very wealthy people. You know, not insulting as insofar as, you know, the classist, but the level of understanding they have into the interpersonal relationships that should be going on. I mean, and that's actually really, really insightful, you know. So, I mean, I think that's something that needs to be broken down, and I think determines actually the level of inequality going on within our society in general, right? I think. And I think, so one thing also is, you know, the breakdown of the artist as this individual, as, you know, only someone that has to live off their work. You know, to a certain degree, there's this understanding that this person doesn't need to do this. It's a luxury, which is, I think, kind of wrong. You know, some people need to make it in order to survive. So in order for somebody else to understand that, it has to be expressed.
And on top of that, asking for money just, you know, at the museum or venues where people are asking you to show for exposure is one thing, but you know, you need to get paid for your work. If you're being asked to put stuff up on somebody's wall, well, that's real time. Why shouldn't you get paid to put, I mean, professional hanging services get paid. I mean, I use them, we have an art brokerage and we help put art into, you know, office buildings and people's homes. We pay people to put that stuff up on the wall. If you're in, you know, a venue, if you're at a gallery, or if you're in a coffee shop where you're going to be exhibiting your work, you know, there needs to be some compensation for your time, and asking for that. If we all get in the habit of that, it makes it harder for people to say, well, so-and-so didn't. You know, they did it for free. Because the more they can't say that to you, the more they can't say that to you.
Also going back to that negotiation, I think money is sometimes the easiest thing. It's like the you know, everybody wants money. Oh, and people, and you know, wealthy people are like, oh, of course you want my money. To a certain degree, what's most valuable is the relationship. You know, so basically you want to, if they don't want to buy something, it's like, oh, okay, how about I throw a little party for some of you and your friends? Or, you know, how about maybe you buy this for the museum? You know, so there's different ways of having that object continue a life with this relationship. Maybe they know somebody that might write about your work. Maybe you can barter for something. Maybe that person is owns real estate and has an empty storefront. Oh, you don't want to buy it? You know what? How about you give me a month in your empty storefront? There's all these different ways to handle it. Because again, they just want to understand how this object sits in their life.
Yeah, so a lot of self-advocating. But
That's
also
very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And very creative, and I just wonder, as an artist, you know, you're asked to do this, this, and this. I mean, and maybe not everyone's personality is like that.
Yeah, that's
So it's kind of interesting. You might need to form a relationship with someone who could, you know, maybe do that for somebody who's maybe shy, or
that's a good point.
Or an artist group gets together.
okay, yeah, support.
I mean, nobody works in a vacuum. You know, nobody succeeds in a vacuum. So you definitely have to kind of, again, yeah, there's somebody's pace that goes with yours, and then therefore.
You know, we always joke that artists should get an MBA along with their MFA, because I do feel like that skill will benefit you if you're able to sell your work, talk about your work, promote your work, market your work. That's only going to benefit you as an artist, because you expect someone to somehow do it better than you. I feel like that's the model of the gallery and the museum, and the reality is, can they really do it better than you? I mean, maybe they can. Maybe they're better at selling, they have more experience. But I also feel like as an artist, like, don't be so quick to advocate that responsibility, because I feel like you have a lot of power. Yeah, they have connections to bring people in and talk about your work, but I feel like as an artist, like, you also have the opportunity to like talk to people about your work, and I think that you're your own best advocate in a lot of ways to take that opportunity when it comes.
You need to build those relationships, you know, even off the chance encounter with someone who's looking at your work, and you get to talk to them about it, you know, get their name, maybe get them on your email list, you know, talk to them a little bit. That's important. And to go back to the MBA thing, yeah, you are a business person. You're stuck with it. You need to understand how your taxes work. You need to understand what you can write off, and you need to keep receipts. I mean, the little things, the mile you drove from your home to, to the venue, every time you do it is a write-off. There's a million things you can write off because you are self-employed.
Museum memberships.
Museum memberships.
Yeah.
You bring a bottle of wine to an opening, it's a write-off. And you need to keep track of that. You should assume that part of every month is going to be spent doing accounting. I mean, it's just the reality. If you want to take, you're probably not in the highest tax bracket, so a write-off for you is, maybe 10 or 15% of that value, as opposed to 28% or 35% of that value. But it's still a write-off. It's something you're keeping in your pocket instead of putting in the government's pocket. Do it. And also, when you're negotiating with places, you are selling your service. Your service is, I make art. Remember, you are selling it. You get to negotiate. You are in charge. You can always say, not going to do it.
All right, I want to circle back to two things. First and foremost, whenever I hear the word taxes, it's like my brain explodes. I don't know if anyone else has that experience. But part of what we're doing with Practice Best Practice is also workshops. And one of our workshops is going to be on how to do taxes as an artist. It's something that's not, it's not a thing that I've experienced in undergrad or grad school. And so as a community, we're interested in helping people understand that. So we'll let you know when that happens. And the other thing, I want to go back to this idea of someone who's shy, right? Because this is something I think about a lot. If you're a shy person and you need to get yourself out there, you need to talk to people, and you're like, wow, crippling anxiety is keeping me from being a successful artist. That's real. But what I will say, especially about New Bedford, over here, is that if you live in a place where there is a local community center like this lovely place that we're in, or the art museum, it's small enough, these things are small enough that you as an artist can say, or can ask me, like, hey, I'm looking to get this grant and I need an institution to back me on this. That's not gonna take any time for us. That's like me writing a letter of recommendation maybe for you, or you just writing my name on a piece of paper. If you call and ask permission of these local places, I'm not saying don't call the ICA and ask for this. I'm sure that they'll say no, but small places like this, or like here in New Bedford, these are real conversations we can have, especially if you're an artist who has exhibited at the museum before. And there's a ton of you who are in the room right now, that your relationship, going back to the relationship thing, doesn't end when your exhibition is over. Okay. Woo! Okay, so...
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Going back to the whole business situation, I've worked with so many artists that have gotten audited. Like, I don't want to put the fear of death, but I think something really real to consider is to establish yourself as an LLC to kind of avoid that situation. The federal tax code does not identify art as a service or a good. It's somewhere in between. And it's bizarre, it's Byzantine. It just doesn't understand how people want to make things, It's really interesting. Another thing I wanted to mention, the MFA Boston, every year, they have a symposium, conference, and it's all about the tax code. It's mostly geared to the very wealthy who want to give gifts to the MFA, but every year, I've been going for like 5 or 6 years now, every year I've noticed, and I tell other artists, and I've noticed more and more artists going, because, okay, let's say you want to give your work to the MFA, or if you give it to a museum, that gift is only liable for the value of the material, not the current retail value, not even half of the actual value. That is bizarre. The way the loophole around it is like, let's say you give it to me, then I give it to the MFA. But that's bizarre. Anyway, so there should be legislation around this. Just wanted to bring that up. But
What do you mean by material?
Let's say you spend $50 on paint.
Well, what about your idea and your creativity?
Has nothing to do with the tax value.
Yeah.
No.
Bizarre, right?
But if I bought your painting for $5,000 and I give it to a museum, I can get the $5,000 write-off. So it has to do with the market value of your work, not the
But not-
value of it in your studio before somebody buys it.
Right.
That's kind of the
But not the-
line that they draw.
Yeah, the market value of your work, but not the market value of work you have not actually sold.
Exactly, that has
So,
no more.
so you may be selling things on a regular basis for $1,000 a pop or $5,000 a pop. If you give something to someone, it's worth, what did your paint and the piece of canvas cost you? That's one of the things that you will see in your packets, a thing about art auctions and donating art, and that's a big piece of that. There are ways to do it where, you get the money and you donate the money back. There are ways to do it where you donate the art and you are just being taken advantage of. I encourage you to read that. That may be something we'll have more of a discussion on later on in the course of this evening. But it's really important because it's one of the biggest ways that artists get taken advantage of. Can you please donate something to us?
But as an LLC, you can avoid a lot of that, all of it, actually.
Yeah, there are ways that it can be done, but you got to understand how that works
Yeah.
too. That's not straightforward either.
Yeah.
Random question for you, because you do public art. Did you have to become an LLC to put your stuff out in public? Like if someone fell on your artwork?
We have to have insurance, yeah.
Okay.
So we were sort of advised, somewhere. I feel like a lot of this stuff is contextual.
Yeah.
Like when you're emerging, maybe you would exhibit for exposure, right? It's better than open studios, right? Like
Right.
you want, and then like you show with a couple galleries and then you sell work, now you have market value.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of a cumulative process. I'm not, maybe if you went to Yale and you come out of the gate and sell your work for $20,000, it's a different conversation, but again, I feel like you're gonna get started, and at some point you have zero market value.
Right.
Except what you think you're worth, but I feel like as you go along, it's a little easier to ask for money because you have a track record, you have a reputation, you're no longer willing to do it for free.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, it's gonna cost me at least $100, $200 to bring it there, like, can you cover these costs? I think you get better at advocating for yourself as you go along. Definitely friends, definitely people you admire, like hanging out with them who are 10, 20 years older than you, like, what do you do? Like, and asking a lot of detailed questions. I feel like this idea that it is kind of a handshake business, it's not, like, this isn't all written down, like, otherwise everyone would have learned it in high school, right? This is kind of what you're going into, where either people are as good as their word or they're not. Like, that's kind of the industry. And, I think galleries are really important, artists work with them as partners, I feel like, but I feel like kind of like that cumulative idea of value is kind of like the reality of it. You may start out, just getting started.
Yeah.
Two points off of that. One, as we create the market, we can also destroy the market. The more people do stuff for little or nothing, the more it's hard for people who actually are trying to sell. It devalues the value of art all in all. Again, back to auctions, when things get auctioned for less than their retail or gallery value, you're screwing yourself, you're screwing the local art market, because you're bringing the expectations of what things value down. And those things are important to not do. We want to bring the value up, not bring the value down. So you have to make sure that as you're doing your negotiation, that you're thinking about not just you, but the other artists in your market, because they all matter. The ones who are doing well help you. The ones that are giving their stuff away hurt you. I lost my other point. Getting things by a handshake. It's become a whole lot easier to create a paper agreement, because nowadays, reality is, if you email somebody something, that these are my terms, and they email back that they have agreed, you now have a contract. You can enforce that contract. So you don't necessarily have to show up with a piece of paper that looks like a legal document to say, sign this. Or, if you explain in plain English, this is what I will do, and this is what I expect to be paid for it, this is what you will do, and this is what you expect for your compensation. Do we agree or do we negotiate? Once you've got that all done, just even in email, just keep track of it. You might want to print it out, but that's a real contract.
And I think with auctions or maybe in the beginning you do a jury show, or but there comes a point where you're just not willing to do it, so I kind of feel like that, and unfortunately I feel like it does prey on people getting started. I feel like that's when you're the most vulnerable because you so desperately believe in yourself and you want to put your artwork out, and you're so likely to get taken advantage of. Like there's a lot to try and avoid as you're getting started, I feel like. As you go along, it's easier to say, like, I'm definitely not going to do that for free, or that's really not a good deal, and you can walk away from it because you have other things going on or better. It's hard when you don't really have something going on that's better, like kind of when you're getting started. I think for auctions too, there's ways to give your work and say, this is the price, you can't sell below this price, I want 50% of this. There's what, can I have a ticket for my spouse so we can go to this nice event? There's ways, again, like you can advocate, you can ask for things for yourself, or you can say, like, that's really not a good deal, like, I'm really not willing to give it to you for nothing, but maybe it's a museum that's had your work, or, a cause that's near and dear to you that you would like to support with your work. So I feel like there's not necessarily a blueprint, but there's definitely ways to take care of yourself and have your artwork seen. I feel like art auctions definitely cater to people who want to get like a deal. So in a way, it's not like a great deal for artists, kind of as a concept, like as a fundraising model. It's kind of like using art for this other purpose of raising money. And I think it really depends, like which one are we talking about and what are the terms.
Do you guys kind of coming off of that, like there's this attitude around artists having to pay their dues, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and what I mean by that is like, let's say I'm just fresh out of my MFA, if I'm fresh out of my MFA, maybe I need to pay my dues before I get a museum show. There's like these hierarchies. And we keep on talking about like alluding to this idea of like, yeah, maybe you are an emerging artist and it's okay to show in a coffee shop, or maybe you're a mid-career artist and you care about that coffee shop, so you want to put your stuff up. Like, how can you give us some examples or some clues to how we can know when to gauge this for ourselves? Any thoughts, feelings?
I'm not sure if artists have to pay their dues. I kind of feel like, you have a show, it's incredibly successful, you sell out, you have a museum show. And I feel like, for some artists, that might be the end. Like, they had all the success and then they're done, And I think some artists, maybe they're getting started, the work is like, okay, it's not great, it's like getting there, and maybe by the 10th show, it's like, wow, it's really looking awesome. So I kind of feel like that's a personal path of the artist, just talking about like the work itself. How do people respond to it? Like, do people buy it? Do people write about it? I feel like it could be like out of the gate, like you're a superstar and your career just goes up from there. We could cite examples of artists who've had that trajectory.
So you're talking about when artists have a solo show, let's say 10 solo shows, is that what you mean when you say you could have 10 shows and maybe about the 10th one, you're talking about just showing their work, let's say,
Yeah, I think that was a choice for me to kind of get away from group shows and kind of have the opportunity to at least do solo shows.
Or even with another artist.
Exactly, like you're trying to push your work, and push how it's seen, so I feel like some of those choices you're making to try and make your work better.
So when you do that, do you have a proposal you write something, or you just pick up the phone and say, I'd like to meet with you about the show?
Yeah, like college galleries are great. I feel like they give solo shows. Commercial galleries are great. It can be really hard to get a solo show. You have to be selling to some extent to get a solo show in a commercial gallery. Like, that's just the way the economic model is. They can't show you endlessly without selling your work. So, or museum shows, there's a lot of museums that'll have like a space to help people locally or emerging artists to like give them that chance to do like a solo project or like, so I feel like that's kind of what you're looking for in a way. In my opinion.
Yeah, even when you're doing the small shows, doing the coffee houses, that kind of thing, there are things you can do to make it possibly pay you and also make it more professional. I mean, if you're going to be putting your stuff on the wall in a restaurant or the wall in a coffee shop, the first thing you should negotiate is that the place sells your work through their cash register. Because if people have to do this extra step of contacting you 9 out of 10 times, it's not going to happen. And And it's no big deal for a restaurant or business that has a cash register to take the money for your piece and sell it. Now, if you have to negotiate, does the show have to stay up as is until it's over? Then we have to deal with deliveries and stuff. Well, that's fine. But signage should be good. Signage should make it clear that the stuff is for sale. This stuff should be for sale if it's in a place like that. It's not free wallpaper, and you should make it clear how that all works. Who's responsible for what? Some of this is in some of the handouts too, but just even that, having it labeled, having it priced, having something that says, if you're interested in buying this, I encourage people to make sure that it's on the menu. Seriously, the artwork is for sale.
After the creme brulee.
Because we're mostly called it New Bedford Artists, do you have sort of specific examples of restaurants or coffee shops or businesses that are receptive to artists in the area?
That's our next workshop.
Where's Jeff's curating the other co-working space?
Oh yeah, it's a gallery attached to a co-working space.
What is that one called?
It's called Groundworks.
That's what it is, yeah.
Right.
They have a new space. Jessica is curating it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are places like that are, galleries that are run as an aside to another thing, like the gallery here that Dina runs, and where the work is for sale and it is professional, and it's it's a gallery. It's just the gallery doesn't have to make all its money on the sales because there are other things funding the gallery, which is also helpful and can be a great place for emerging artists to work out of and to make relationships with. But no matter what, you should be thinking about how do I win and how does the business win? How do I win and the venue I'm showing at? How do I win and make sure the art market I exist in win?
Okay, I'm gonna read another quote. I love them. It turns out that an industry organized around profiting from unpaid labor requires more than a certification program to keep it in line. It requires artists to mobilize together as a workforce. And so this is coming, I pulled that from Wage, wageforwork.com. And this idea of mobilizing sounds really exciting, right? But how, where do you even start? Where do we start?
Buddy up.
Call the Guerrilla Girls.
Huh? Start with the people who you make art with, or that you talk about art with, that you share art with. Get a plan. Be part of things like this. Be part of the community. This is a community with hundreds of artists, and many of us know each other or know overlapping Venn diagrams of each other. And we all have to be kind of on the same page. Think of it as an artist union without the dues.
I might actually add something if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that it's important to pay your collaborators. So if you're doing a collaborative project and you're the lead on that project, you should work with your collaborators to secure funds and then pay your collaborators. That's, I think, important.
Yeah, and there's lots of different ways to think about collaborators too. Just to sort of piggyback off that, for example, I have musicians that I work with, and I don't do my performance unless I can pay other people. It's just and that might mean I only do one performance per year because musicians aren't cheap, but it's important, and this goes back to this idea of mobilizing. We don't want to reinforce bad behavior, right? We don't want to reinforce the idea that artists shouldn't get paid. We need to be paying each other too. I think about it as an artist economy, and what comes with the artist economy is the hustle, of tapping into resources. And there's also this part of the hustle or thinking about opportunities is that you might be approached with something, but maybe it's not a good deal for you, but another artist that would fit better with, like giving those names out, like helping each other in that way too. I know that we talk about the art world as being super competitive, and it is, but we also should be helping each other out too.
Being competitive doesn't rule out being collaborative, or, it doesn't mean that we can't work together. There are levels of competition, but there are also ways in which we all have to support each other.
And along those lines, I mean, there's different levels of compensation. So yeah, maybe I don't have cash to pay you, but damn, I can probably barter you for some skills that I have, and that's just a completely valid way, I think. And it's also cements a relationship even more.
I see a hand floating around? No, totally made that up, great. Okay, so now I have you guys here, and I just want to hear a little bit about your experiences, okay? I want to hear about an art auction experience, whether it's been good or bad, just really brief from each of you, because this is a real thing. And as a museum, we run art auctions, and I've got some feelings about them. But tell me, we'll start with Dan, like, have you ever had a good experience with an art auction? What did that look like?
Well, I had a mixed experience that sort of ended up on the good side. I was asked to, and I won't mention the organization, but I was asked to contribute to a big fundraiser art auction here, and I agreed. They had specified a particular piece, and I was like, okay, sure. And I have the ability to sell it to one of my companies, and then I have my company donate it, so I don't have the problem of, taking only the cost of material. So I then brought it to them, and I filled out the paperwork, and they said thank you, and I said, well, where are my tickets? And they were like, what? And I said, where are my tickets? And they said, we don't do that. And I said, well, then give me the piece back. And I said, it costs you nothing to have me at your event, and you're gonna make money on that. And they were like, And so they went off and talked, and they came back with 2 tickets, and they started giving other artists who had donated tickets to the event. To me, that just seemed like it should have been natural, What, you don't want me to be there to be able to talk about the art? You don't want me to, help make it seem more valuable? What? And sure, I will eat some of your food and drink some of your wine, but I guarantee you're going to make more than I'm going to cost you. And then there was a conversation about where do you start the bidding. And so there was some interesting back and forths, but at least they learned, we are not disposable. Our art isn't the valuable part, it's our art and the artist.
Donna, have you had an experience?
Early on, I had people asking for my artwork more from like art associations who had, given me shows. So I think we went back and forth, and I finally gave him a piece, and I wanted to name the buyer. So I think I had that person on my mailing list, but they kind of felt like they got this great deal, which they did. So it was always this awkward thing where I didn't really want to stay friends with you because you just bought my work at a fraction of what it cost. Like, I didn't feel great about it, so I didn't advocate, I think, as well for myself as I would now.
Yeah.
But I'm on the New Bedford Museum now too, so they call and ask me, but I just give money. Like, I'd rather just write a check, honestly. I feel like the whole, you're going to be able to sell my work, and is it going to go for really cheap? And I don't know, I'm not really willing to go there, so I just say, how much do you want to write your check? And make it that way. I would love to support the organizations that are supporting me, but I think on my own had to have an idea of what my work is worth, and do I want to put myself out there and not get bit? I feel like there's a lot of risk involved, more than I'm comfortable with, and so I tend to avoid them.
How did you even know what you would put in? You may not put in your favorite, best, you just...
Yeah, what did I put in? Something that, I think it was a piece that had been in the show in that context, so maybe it made sense, and,
Do you want this? Everybody can hear me, right? Yeah. So I think you guys are talking about the benefit auction. I'm coming from a gallery world, so the benefit auction, they they've definitely approached me all the time to get artists to donate. I've sat on benefit auction committees that picks the artwork, and personally, I actually dissuade artists from giving art that has been shown before, because to me, that work is a little bit more valuable, because it already has a provenance, it has an exhibition history. And I always incentivize and tell the artist, listen, we're gonna probably get it framed for you, get something out of it, you know? But then in turn also, because of the federal tax code situation, I tell them, you know what, you should give it to somebody else and they would donate it, and then you give them their art and then they would donate it. And so therefore you get around this loophole of taxes. If and when it sells, then you get the full retail value of it. Then there's auctions are the only way that museums can deaccession art. That's just something everybody should know. Then there's, I work with collectors and institutions, and I always write in the contract, the bill of sale, when I do sell to a museum, that work before it gets sold at auction needs to be offered back either to the gallery or to the artist. That's something that's kind of a legalese that you should be aware of. I bid at auction for collectors. I buy at auction. I also sell at auction. Christie's, Sotheby's, Phillips, and then there's like auctions all over the world. I mean, I am a dealer, I am a gallerist, so I am looking for deals in order to resell that artwork. That is part of, the Andy Warhol print market fuels the art auction market. That is a fact. So I think there is benefits to it, and of course there are ways where artists can get royally screwed. So another thing to be aware of is that when your work goes at auction, sells at auction, you don't get a percentage of it. In California, they have a law, and also in Europe. It's called it's a French term of droit de bois, it's something like that. It's
Droit
like
de suite.
Droit de suite is like the right to ownership, or the right to sell. I forget what the translation is. So that's something to be aware of as well.
Here it translates into retained equity.
Yeah.
That's what it's called in our markets. Where there's a couple of different kinds of auctions. Retained equity applies to all of them, but it's more important in the kind of Sotheby's and Christie's kind of auctions, where part of the deal is that you retain a percentage of the value. So somebody buys a thing for $10,000. They don't actually pay $10,000. You retain 10% of the equity. They pay $9,000. Whatever they pay the 90%. Whenever that sells in the future, you get 10% of the markup. That's retained equity.
That should be national.
It should, but there is no infrastructure for it at this point, so it really only works with, galleries that you have a serious relationship with and are stable, well-selling galleries. It's something that a lot of people are looking to create the infrastructure for, and now with RFID chips and all these other things, it's actually a relatively easy infrastructure to create. But it's something you should keep your ear to the ground about, because it's important. If you sell something, in your early career for $500 and later on it sells for $50,000, why didn't you get a piece of that? And that's the concept behind it. And you do have to keep the track of two different things, benefit auctions and art auctions are two, like the Sotheby's and Christie's things are very different than when somebody asks you to donate a piece. Christie's and Sotheby's are not asking you to donate a piece. That's not how that works. You have to be careful about when we talk about that, which one we're talking about. But also, there are a number of ways to make it work equitably. Donating just money is fine. You should never put in a piece of crap work, something you no longer stand behind. That does not represent you well. It is not good for your career. You should never just donate something unless there's a really good reason you can justify that, because it hurts the art market. The place should be serious about how the stuff is displayed, how it's lit, how it's cataloged. They should be serious about where the starting value is. Avoid raffles unless raffle tickets start at the retail value of the lowest priced item in the raffle, because you don't want people to think, again, you can get art for nothing. The $5 ticket, so there are a lot of things to think about in that. Again, some of that's in the handouts, and all these handouts are going to be available online at some point as well.
To complicate it even a little bit further, with the internet, there's been an incredible proliferation of selling art online. So there's a lot of online auction action going on these days. Paddle 8, again, some of them are benefit auctions, some of them are actually dealers selling, some of them are actually artists selling their work online. It is a way to cut that middle person as well. Paddle 8, Heritage, there's different public art auctions, and then there's just auction websites.
I'm sort of smiling because I'm like, my brain is exploding right now. You guys are just like full of info. I'm gonna ask a feelingsy question just to like bring it down a little bit. I mean, not bring it down, feelings are here. How is valuing, because we're talking about valuing ourselves, right? Like, how is valuing yourself, your time, and your labor, how is that a political statement? How can that be a political statement? Do you consider it a political statement? Yes.
Wow, I never thought of it as a political statement, but at some level it is. I think of it as a personal statement. My time doesn't come free. I have to think about all the things that get involved in my work. I mean, I have to think about stuff. All the years I took to get to the point where I can create the stuff that I'm creating now, all has value and somehow had to be paid for. It all becomes part of that. So I think standing up and saying, hey, it's art, but art matters, is in its own way a political statement.
I think, you always hear all these statistics about women are earning 60 or 80% of what men earn, so I feel like getting paid as a woman artist, there's that level of like, do I get paid what other people are getting paid, where men doing the same work, whether it's like talking about art, writing about art, selling my work, doing public art projects, so you always maybe in the back of your mind like, wait, did I just get paid less than this other guy, like who just got paid 20% more? So I feel like at some point, as a woman, you can use that to just keep asking, like, is that all you're doing? Like I feel like to some extent you can learn to use that to your advantage. To feel like you're getting paid what you're worth, and like what other people who are equal to you are also getting paid. And that's very subjective in the art world, but it's just a good thing, I think, to keep in the back of your mind. Did I really ask for enough? Because the idea that whatever you ask for benefits another artist also asking to get paid for their work, or their, I think it's a collective ripple.
So how do you do that? Do you keep track of the time you put in? You spent years studying art or photography, and that's worth something? Going to art school, graduate school, whatever.
Yeah, I think all those things.
You look at somebody else's work, who's.
Or you might say like.
Kind of like yours, but how can you say that?
Well, pricing work, I feel like is a whole other, PhD thesis. Like, how do you price your work? And
isn't that part of the value in you're trying to sell?
Definitely, yeah. I can price it by size or by, what's $5,000 worth? What's $2,000? I feel like pricing is
abstract. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think there's a formula.
It might not be for
unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh no, it's incredibly.
But I feel like it's incredibly subjective because there's so many. What is someone willing to pay for it? What is $5,000 worth to the person who wants to buy it, right? What could I buy with $5,000? Like a nice sofa. I can't buy a car really, except it's like a really used car. So it's like but you have to think of all those things like in a way, as well as like what's my rent? Like what did I spend on? Like what did it cost to me to make it? Did it take a month? Did it take a year? Did it take a week? So I feel like pricing your art, all those things come in. What do your peers price their work at? Are they your same age? Are they the same, they're getting solo show, so I feel like there's I feel like that's kind of a social thing. You want to ask other people, you want to ask galleries, you want to, want to talk to museums, you want to go to a lot of shows and look at prices. You know, did someone sell out with $500 pieces? Did they sell out with $5,000 pieces? You know, I feel like, did they sell out with $50, $100 pieces? Like, I feel like that's very contextual, you know?
It's a negotiation. Everybody asks for a discount too. Do you want to cushion a discount into the price of the work as well? I mean, I think it's definitely subjective. You have to do your market research, and then of course the nuts and bolts. I mean, you know, bronze is incredibly expensive, you know, and so therefore people should pay for that production. You know, of course the nuts and bolts of the craft are, you know, essential to the pricing of the work. But I mean, I think, again, I think I said it earlier, I think it is, art acquires value by being sensed. So the Mona Lisa's price is because it's been seen by millions, billions, everybody on the planet knows what the Mona Lisa is. It's been put on mugs, it's put on t-shirts. So that is how art acquires value, at the basic essence of it. So what do you do in order to have your object acquire that level of value? And, you know, it's all about talking to people, having people write about it, having people show it, having people touch it, having people listen, lick it, you know, I mean, whatever it entails for that object to be sensed. Some people might have to bleed on it. I mean, seriously, I mean, I think, so, and in turn, also think about how people learn. Some people learn through seeing, some people learn through touching. Sometimes it can be synesthetic. Some people listen to color. You know, so as an artist, if you are you say a photographer, you're not, you know, nuts and bolts, you're not gonna go to a painting gallery to sell your photography, but you might want to delve into a slide lecture that's time-based. You might want to look into film. There are people that are film buffs, and there are people that are photo buffs, and there are people that are both, right? So those are different audiences you're creating. So expanding your audience is also, of course, part of this sensing of the object. That make sense?
Yeah, it's just, who are those people?
That's
the
up
hard
to
part,
you.
is to how do you,
I mean, and so then in turn also, that is a taste issue. You're saying, oh, are there certain people that would like my work? I personally don't think that me as a gallerist dealer, I have to make a call on what you should like. So for example, for me to exhibit artwork, for you to, you know, share your work, you can't say, oh, this person's gonna like it or not like it. Because they are a professional, they are kind of a nexus / muffler. So they should determine what other people need to see, or need to hear, or need to feel. Does that make any sense?
that's interesting.
And another thing, just as a tail on to the conversation, you can also think of equivalency. What is the equivalency? You know, would you rather have this piece of art or spend $150 on dinner? You know, where does that fit into your life? You know, is it nicer to wake up to this every morning than to remember the indigestion I had last night? You know, and not just that as the only equivalency, but think about, you know, what else that money could be spent on and the relative value of that, what else that money could have been spent on. It's just one factor, but it is a factor you should think about.
Yeah, and also some other numbers that you need to know about each of your works are the declared insurance value. As a museum, I'm not going to ask you how much your piece costs. We don't sell artwork, but I am going to ask you what the declared insurance value is, and that's going to be different. I mean, a lot of times different from what you're selling it for. And that's, I mean, the way I tell artists, because I always get asked, like, what does that mean? And I'm just like, imagine if this place burnt down, how much do you think it's fair for our insurance company to pay you out for that piece? And you have to really think about it on a pretty realistic playing field, I'll say. Like, you know, because I might make an artwork, this sculpture or whatever, that is like a portrait of my dead grandma, and there's no way I can value this, but I'm deciding to put it in a public space, it gets destroyed. Like, you need to be able to get something out for that, if that destruction happens. I can't tell you how many artists have come to me and said, oh yeah, you know, my piece got mangled at this gallery, and I was like, oh, did the gallery have insurance? They said no, and I was like, or they said, I don't know. I'm like, why didn't you ask if they have insurance? So when you go to exhibit your artwork anywhere, even if it's a coffee shop, ask if they have insurance.
Well, they're supposed to. As a business, everybody should have insurance. Like, it's legal.
Right, well, but
I mean, up to a certain point, you know, they're insured up to like $1 million, $2 million, and there's certain things that they're insured for, you know. Yeah. I've dealt with this, and I mean, it's kind of appalling, the lies people can tell.
Right.
You know. But the other thing is, the insurance companies sure as hell don't want to pay you.
Right.
And they need you. For example, I've been, you know, multiple times, either from a collector or from an artist, hey Camilo, I need proof. This piece got destroyed and the insurance company is asking for proof. They not only want price lists of past exhibitions, they also want actual invoices, paid invoices, and, you know, to prove that this is what was paid for. And so that's something to be aware of, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the document everything. You know, in theory, when people get your artwork in, they do a condition report. They take pictures of what it looked like before, and then you condition it out too. If you're going to show your stuff at a place, and you know, you're not going to insult anyone if you're like, oh yeah, do you need me to provide pictures for this, or do you guys take pictures of the condition report? If they're like, condition report? Just grab your stuff and walk away. Like, seriously.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to I like the email, that is definitely a contract, but I prefer a consignment form. I think every single artwork, I feel more comfortable as a gallerist, as a dealer, having a piece of paper to replace the artwork. You know, and that piece of paper at the core should say how long I'm gonna have it, for how much I'm supposed to sell it, what I'm supposed to get out of the sale, what the artist's supposed to get the sale, and that somebody's gonna pay for shipping back and forth, and that it is insured by somebody. Those are like the core artist contract consignment details.
And we do have examples of that, and so sign up for our mailing list, because we're just pushing out examples. Also, going back to this idea of pricing, this isn't the same thing, but in your packets we have budget examples coming from Creative Capital. So if you are pitching a show somewhere and you want to figure out how to provide a budget, Creative Capital is a really, really awesome resource for artists. You can also apply for a Creative Capital grant. Check that out.
Besides grants, and I think artist residencies are incredible ways to kind of get your work out there. Think about who looks at those applications, right? I mean, these are people that are, you know, sought after, and their eyes are highly prized and valued. And so once your eyes, you know, if it affects them, they're gonna remember it, right? Does that make any sense? So besides all these, you know, the New Bedford, local community board gives off a grant, but then there's also like, you know, then there's Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. There are so many residencies in the state, in the country, in the world that like you might want to have time for.
And I feel like there are also, you want to look for the ones that have some funding. I feel like that's also a market where there's a huge exploitation of artists, and kind of rich artists kind of take vacations and call it a residency. It's all paid for. You're going to pay for the whole thing to the tune of thousands of dollars. So I feel like our residencies are something too, where you really want to look closely. Is it, you know, are you paying to enter? Or who's paying for your travel to go there? Who's paying for your food and lodging if it's for multiple weeks? Are you getting a stipend while you're there? Are you getting funding for your materials while they're there? I think they can be amazing. But I feel like it's also a field where it's full of landmines when you're looking at these opportunities. There's a lot of things. What's in it for you? Is it really helping you? Or is it someone else kind of preying on the idea that artists are rich and have a lot of time and money to throw away? And so I feel like choose carefully, but they're great. I was glad you said that. You said in the beginning about being on boards of residencies. I think, especially for mid-career artists, I think it's a way to get out, break outside of your community, your peers, meet other people who are exactly the same place as you in their careers. They're looking for new partners, collaborators, put together a new show. You know, I feel like residencies are amazing experiences, especially for emerging and mid-career artists. I think they can be really pivotal.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on the, like, thinking about who's on these panels, You know, this goes to when you apply for shows and there's a fee, right? Every time, I mean, I'm kind of like, oh man, I'm not gonna pay over $25 because I can't, you know? But if they say who the panelists are, and the panelists are like curators at places that I'm interested in, or other artists, or whoever, I mean, that's who we gather to be on these panels. And so then it's like, well, is it worth $25 for the curator of, you know, so-and-so to actually see my work? And as a curator, like I'll see work and it'll just log away until I'm like, oh, I'm doing a show and this person, I mean, and it's in there. So that's something to think about too, is like trying to sort of weigh that value. You know, is $50 too much when like the only person who's gonna look at it is that in-house curator? I would say yeah, probably, you know, but that's, maybe some of you guys are rolling in it, you can just push it out.
Also, you have to think about, you know, am I taking a shot at submitting several pieces and getting maybe one, maybe none into a group show, or am I making a proposal where, you know, I'm going to get a gallery?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are two very different levels of what, you know, the cost to apply for might matter, you know.
I used to pay to enter when I was younger. I don't at all now. We usually write them and asking them about like, hey, you know, you can, a lot of times you can say, I can't afford the fee, a lot of places will waive the fee. Like again, I think it's leveraging, you know, your own experience against, you know, and granted some of the money might go to the curators, so it's not like, but then you feel like it's an institution, like there should be some funding, I don't know, like at what point are they just using the artists to like pick other, like to get rejected? Like in a way, you're just paying to get rejected. It's a super competitive thing. You really have no chance of getting, like one person's gonna get out of 10,000 that apply. Like to me, I feel like you should look carefully. And maybe in the beginning it makes sense, you're getting your work out there, you're getting it out of your studio, you're getting local curators looking at it. Then at some point I feel like, wait, who's this benefiting? Like I think it's, but also with residencies, I was thinking of like symposia. There's a lot of funding for you to sometimes go somewhere and make work. And this is true in like public art and sculpture. Sometimes I think like mural, that form of public art. There's an international symposium, there's stone carving, there's, you know, metal, wood. So I feel like that is an amazing opportunity. You're getting paid to go make work, you're working in a foreign country, you know, you're working with other artists that are probably all there with you, you know, and I feel like that is, personally something I'm like, why would I go work somewhere else? I'm a wood carver, I need all these tools. Why would I leave my studio? It has everything. So for me, it's like, okay, I could go work with stone, I don't have that in my studio. Like for me, I'm really choosy in a way. Like, can I work bigger than I can in my studio? Like, how is it pushing me beyond like what I can kind of do already, right? Like,
Well, and going on those residencies, I mean, it's important to not undervalue the importance of visual research. Like, maybe you're going overseas to like study different kinds of wood. Well, that was a stretch, but like, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like maybe you're not bringing all your tools to do that, but you're gonna learn something from someone up there, you know? So, I mean, so there's some words that we keep throwing out like value or opportunity. I mean, I think the word opportunity, anytime someone throws that at you as an artist, you should hold that out there and be like, okay, like, is it an opportunity for me actually? Or am I just paying to play?
And does the opportunity outweigh the cost? And also recognize that for some of you know, the places that are asking you to spend some money to submit, it's a screening mechanism. It's a method of saying, you know, you must be serious. And oftentimes if you then contact them and say, hey, you know, I am serious and I have, you know, a body of work and I show and I show and I show, you know, that's very different than, and many times they will waive, you know, whether there's, you know, a fee or not, they will say, no, never mind, you're obviously a serious artist, as opposed to, you know, I mean, literally I have had people tell me, you know, I would like a show in your gallery, and, you know, I take pictures and then I run them through Photoshop and make them look like paintings. Good. What does that mean? And tell me how that's art that, you know, fits with what my gallery is trying to show. That's what I'm interested in, not, you know, your process that may or may not have anything to do with it actually becoming art. So think about, you know, there are reasons why sometimes there are fees involved, but they don't always have to be paid. No, seriously.
No, I know, I was just a funny
Sure.
statement. I mean, well, and it's all about asking, right?
Yeah,
Again, the
that's
worst
really
thing that could happen if you call me up and say, can I waive this fee, is I'm just gonna say no. You know, then, I mean, there's lots, and there's also
You
the.
still have the choice to apply, like.
Right.
Yeah.
And
You
no,
didn't lose anything by asking.
right, and, you know, no non-serious artist will make that phone call or send that email.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to open it up to questions, if you guys have any burning questions, feelings, thoughts. And before I throw it out there, and this goes for us too, if you have like a question that's specific to like a project you're working on, like how do I get funding for my puppy photography? Like maybe save that for the end and we can talk about that individually. So, okay, any questions? I just scare everyone.
Are there certain apps you use for consignment contracts?
Certain what?
Like apps, you know, there's certain apps.
Like defined assignment?
Yeah, for consignment.
For contracts themselves?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them up on the internet. You can search them on the internet and find a million of them. Hard part is then you have to kind of sift through them and figure out which ones mean anything, and which ones are, you know, which ones make sense and which ones make sense for you and the kind of work you're doing. One of the things you'll find in the packet is we have a contract for the gallery, but we also have a one-page plain English version that is designed to tell you what we're actually saying in that legalese. At least it's a guide before you start reading the legalese. You should understand some of the legalese as well, but at least it gives you an idea where you're negotiating from.
I mean, I'm thinking you mean probably for somebody to easily sign a document and return it to you quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, PDF viewer, I think you can have people digitally sign documents and those are really easy to email back and forth. I think that's maybe the closest you might get to an app, if you will.
Yeah, so like I was thinking for like, when you talk about when you're working with like cafes and stuff like that, like, obviously they're probably not gonna have a whole system in place to sell
No, and that's the thing too.
I'm thinking like something that's a streamlined contract and payment method almost like.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways to get paid these days. Venmo, PayPal, you know, yeah.
But if I.
Bitcoin.
Um,
Seriously. I got paid by Bitcoin. It's amazing.
I don't, yeah. I had like imagine a little Lego man holding a little. But that kind of thing, like if you want to show in like a coffee shop or whatever, or one time I had like these people approach me, they wanted to use my masks for a private party. And I wrote them back and I was like, sure, I'm gonna write a contract though. And if the masks get messed up, then you're paying me. And it's gonna be a lot of like creating those things.
They should have paid you for their use. I mean, a mask rental fee.
I know, I'm a wimp. I know.
I've been like the Cordova has a corporate art collection that they lend out, the lending library. And, you know, I was, oh, do you pay the artists? Like, oh, well, no, we don't. But we're a nonprofit. And I'm like, okay, well,
So
why, well, we're saving the artist storage fees. I'm like, oh. But then again, how about if they have no art to show other people or to sell?
Yeah.
And so it's a quandary.
For the record, once I said I need a contract signed, they just didn't write back, so
Yeah.
we didn't get into the,
Yeah.
but yeah, other thoughts?
I have a question. We talked a little bit about communicating value to people who are outside of the art community. And so in talking to nonprofits maybe that are new to working with artists or even to corporate entities, I'm wondering like what are some of the strategies in talking about how and why you value a piece? We were kind of touching on that when someone here had asked a question and talking about time and education. But because art is so nebulous oftentimes, I'm really wanting to, how do I communicate this value?
Yeah.
Like go to each of you. Like, because that's something that, you know, working in New Bedford, for example, I think there are a lot of new businesses that want to get involved in art, but at the same time, they're like, I don't know, it looks cool, young people like it, but I don't really get it. And I am kind of thinking, how do I bridge that gap?
I mean, with me, I don't necessarily feel there is a need to get it. You know, I mean, I think it's subjective. Everybody has their own different emotions in order to understand it.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it depends on your mood what you get from something, right? I mean, it depends on the time of day sometimes. So that is kind of I want to say a base conversation, like a very are you in kindergarten? I want to be in high school, you know? I mean, and you can actually tackle it that way and say, you know what, it really depends. It depends, it's subjective. But then as for the value conversation, if they're already asking you to bring your work in, they already understand there is a value to it. So, I mean, maybe the conversation doesn't even have to be had.
Or maybe what the conversation is what is the value to you? You obviously want, you know, my work, or you want work on your walls, or you want, you know, this. So what is the reason for that? What are you trying to do? Let me talk to you about how my aesthetic and my work fits into that goal. And then that conversation leads into what's the value, how does it work? Nobody approaches you for your art with no concept of it having a value. You may have to do a whole different set of work if you're approaching somebody who is not approaching you. If you're saying, wow, that's a great blank wall, I want my work there. Then you need to come up with a proposition that makes them think, there's a good reason for that.
For me working at a museum, I think a lot of that has to do with museum education and interpretation. And
Okay.
Yeah, wire.
oh right, sorry, I wired this behind you. And so helping people, I mean, I agree that like if they want artists to come and do things and they're willing, they probably should have a reason why they want that. But what if the reason is just like, oh, because we know that it's cool or that we're supposed to or whatever. Then if you're in a position where you need to explain the importance of that, it's like, well, a strategy I would use is think about what that institution does. If that institution does interpretation for like historical things, then you kind of go in with the guide of interpretation and what we do with artworks and how artists are mediators a lot of times for helping people like feel some feels, and that's important. Or helping people relate to things, that's important. Helping things be beautiful, that's important. I don't know, Donna's feelings. Other things?
I have a question. So, where do I start? I'm a part of a 501(c) organization, and I also, through the organization, produce a transformational gathering in Western Massachusetts that brings in a lot of the arts. However, I haven't had the funds the last couple of years to pay my artists, so I've been taking a percentage of my own sales and paying them, you know, just like taking what I can get and then getting it back into the market, just so that they know that they're appreciated and stuff. So I've developed an art grant committee with a panel of 5 people, and we're all gung-ho, but I just moved here and I don't really have a whole lot of resources yet. How can I get grants for my artists? Or to help, you know, yeah, I mean, I really don't need that much. But just where do I find that?
So you're already a 501(c)(3), so you have access to a lot of information. State, city, federal. I mean, I think just what I did that popped into my head, local lawyer's office. I mean, they are totally sometimes looking to help arts organizations do for pro bono work, especially artists, you know, and then there's the barter. Maybe you give them a painting for their time, right? And that's just one way to start, but there online, there's like a plethora of granting agencies that you can, I mean, and then rolling deadlines, and I mean, there's just, I mean, again, but that's like super time consuming. I mean, I think.
Isn't New Bedford a cultural district? You should have access to Mass Cultural Council local funds through your city.
I'm from Marion, so.
Marion?
Yeah, Marion has a local
Massachusetts?
cultural council as well.
Most towns do, so they don't have a lot of money, but, you know, it's a great way to get seed money, and sometimes you get that and you partner with a business that's willing to match any kind of state money you're able to get, so sometimes you can double your money easily for artists that way.
Local realtor developers, they usually have empty space and they are willing to, 2 months rent to give to you to put together an exhibition. That's matching support. You know?
There's also like Berkshire Taconic is a local one that gives away money. It's in Western Mass, but they give away
Berkshire.
Taconic. That's the region, but they give away grants to all different types of to institutions, to individual artists. They seem to be a local source for a lot of artists that I know.
Yeah, a good one just for everyone is Grant Watch. You pay a yearly fee, and it might be worth it if you're really wanting to dive in to get money for artists. And just like one of those, I mean, it could also, there's grants for everything on there. You type in like, I'm a lady who makes sculpture, and there's all the grants for ladies who make sculpture.
And there are special grants just for women.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's a lot that you can find by Googling. Associated Grantmakers, who I think just changed their name.
Oh yeah, I don't know what it is though.
Associated Grantmakers, start with that and they'll track it to wherever they've changed their name to. They used to have a public for personal use side and an institutional use side. The institutional use side was a paid service, but the public personal side was not. Didn't have everything, but it had stuff that you could as an individual access. And I haven't checked into that quite a lot, but there are lots of resources out there.
Well, and I think it was those guys, but if you can go and look up grants, like an institution like a library will buy a subscription to it and then like set it up on one old ass computer in a basement, and you just go and you can use that. The last time I did that was in the Providence Public Library, the main one that's downtown. You can find that, and I think since then we just talked about this of like where those things are. But yeah, grants are real. Also like thinking about targeting people who have money, and I know that you're new here, but you're also in Marion. And what does that mean? Like, give you some donors, so.
And then also
Chamber of Commerce, businesses.
Local colleges and universities. The professors, I think professors and the faculty, they get special access to granting databases. I'm pretty sure.
Oftentimes.
So like approaching somebody at Tabor or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's an art department.
I'm not afraid to ask.
Maybe there's some art, there's some, emerging artists, some students learning how to paint and put together a show of their work, and then, hey, the school might give money towards that.
Yeah, we can talk more, but does anybody else have a question?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
What's the best way for artists to show their work to galleries, or do they send in like
Good question.
memory sticks?
Yeah, that's
Because
a great question.
people are so busy, it's like, isn't all this stuff going in the trash? Or, I would think you want to see as many.
You want to build a relationship, I would say. You want to go to the gallery a lot, you want to know who's going to be making a decision about your work, who might, in a museum, who might have time to look at your work, and ask. I feel like the face-to-face is probably more powerful than like an email. You can definitely do a lot of research online. Is the gallery taking submissions? A lot of galleries will say it on the website to save you the time, but I feel like it's going to be the relationship that's going to give you that opportunity.
And just to follow up on that, let's say I'm new and I don't know how to start a relationship with a curator, or someone who's looking at stuff.
Like go to the event. Doesn't the museum have like openings, and find out, ask someone to introduce you to Jamie, if you're trying, or Camilo, you're trying, you gotta kind of navigate, kind of figure out how to navigate. You go as a group with a couple friends, go ask them, get one of your socialite, like extroverted friends to do something that you would find embarrassing. Like, I feel like that personal stuff is really, we'll see.
So then what would be the next step? Would you,
It totally depends on the institution. So for example,
That's
just
true.
to jump in, so New Bedford Art Museum / Artworks is an open call museum. That's not super typical. Like somewhere like, I mean, Camilo and I were on a panel that were talking about this specifically. And it never came up, even though we were at RISD and the RISD contemporary curator was there, it never came up that like, you don't really just pitch your work to RISD Museum. You don't really pitch your work to the ICA. It's that, my assumption is that if those curators, and this is an assumption, get an email that says, here's all of my work, or like a beautiful packet that took you forever to put together and you mail it to them. Even I don't look at packets. I don't have time. Those things go, unfortunately, right in the trash.
Not necessarily.
In
Not
just
necessarily.
some people. There's times that if I open it, I'm like, this is cool, but
Yeah, exactly.
other times it. So I guess I say that to say like, it depends completely on the institution. If the institution is an open call institution, it'll tell you. Yeah, and also the person looking at it.
The actual curator, I mean, I think, again, it's a lot of word of mouth, it's a lot of communication. So I think one basic thing is learn how to talk, right? I mean, I think it's, and learn how to write. So, I mean, sign up to your favorite gallery's email announcement and read it and go to see the show. And then you start developing a relationship with that gallery. And you know what? I'm gonna send this person because I think they would be interested in my work. And I'm gonna reference a show that I saw there. You know, it's responding to a place and to the artwork itself. The same way you would want somebody to remember your work, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing. It's the same relationship. And going back to the museums, I think, you know, again, we treat these, they're not neutral, and we treat them as these temples. Yes, they were created by very wealthy individuals, but who pays for them? We do. They are 501c3 nonprofits. We are citizens. We own those places. So we, to a certain degree, have a right to access to those places. You know, so like, basically it's bound to happen where, you know, this curatorial class needs to understand that there's very few of them, first of all, and there's many more artists. So you have to understand that relationship as well. But, you know, I mean, so who do they listen to? Who are they reading? You have to do your research along those lines as well. Who are they visiting? Unfortunately, let's say this statistic came out in New York that I think it was like 93% of all the museum exhibitions, all those artists had a major gallery. That's problematic, I think, because then it's only being funded through these major galleries. And it was like, I think like 5 New York galleries. That is pathetic. And why is that? I mean, you know, to a certain degree, who holds controls of these museums?
who's in power?
Exactly.
Yeah, and what's the pipeline to get yourself into those museums?
Those curators are super busy, tending to sit down with their donors, having dinners, and all they're seeing is what their donors own. So to a certain degree, actually, the Board of Trustees is an inbuilt collector class. So those people, that information is out there. You can get the trustee board names and find out on Google where they live, call them up, get their emails, send them a packet, and then the curators start listening. I've actually done this shit. Because it's just like, okay, how do I do this? Look at me, I'm a brown man, dreadlocks, Dominican. I'm like a unicorn in the contemporary art world. So I had to figure out how to kind of navigate this opaque, nefarious, you know, I didn't even like the word dealer. You know, I mean, I'm from the Bronx. The dealer was sitting on the corner doing something wrong, you know? So where did that word come from? Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think...
And I think in terms of approach, like you chat with them, you introduce yourself, I'm an artist. A normal thing might be like, would you like to do a studio visit with me? Or like, I have a show at this gallery, like, could we go look at it together? Like, you kind of want to engage them. Like, if they show some interest, like, that would be a normal thing. Or, you know, someone who owns a gallery, would you like to come to my studio? Or like, I'm having open studios, you know, you want to let people know who you would like to have come, you know, so I think that's kind of a normal sense of engagement, you know, like that, you know, maybe it goes from there.
You have sculpture, so you can't possibly have all of it unless you have a huge studio. I mean,
Right,
Like,
yeah.
sometimes with three-dimensional things. You don't always, depending on your space.
Yeah, a studio visit is gonna be some finished work and some stuff in progress, right? So you're looking at just like a snapshot of a body of work.
But studio visits are often important to galleries and gallerists. You also have to have stuff that's ready to present. You don't want bad images of your work. You want some stuff online that you can quickly connect people to. You want to have the ability to also have enough stuff in your portfolio that you can put together a quick proposal with some great images of the stuff that's targeted at the conversation you're having. So you need to have that stuff available. It doesn't have to be all prepped. I mean, you don't have to have 10 packets already, put together. But if you
What's
don't,
in a packet?
huh?
We can, just to be safe on time, we can talk about it, because I've got 15 more minutes. And those questions, like what's in a packet, like, what the heck am I supposed to do? Those questions you could totally ask people like any of us up here, and we could point you in the direction of, there's some literature on like how to put together those packets, and I can maybe even post a link too, because it's a good question, and it's a thing that is not being taught in school, in these art schools. Here's what I want to do, if you guys are all down. I want to take the next 15 minutes to just like mingle, talk to each other. We spent a lot of time talking about how this is a relational situation, so let's be a little relational. Do we have a survey?
Yes.
It's really important to us that the four of us that are organizing this aren't the only ones thinking about what's important to tell you, but we want to know what you want to know. So if you could fill out the survey, it would be a huge help. So before we start mingling, can we give huge claps for these guys?